graph, they like a chart that they could look at and in a matter of seconds understand the point that you're trying to make and then start to think about what they could do with it. So here, this is a mock-up of a patent portfolio that deals with the biodiesel area. And it's been divided into these technology buckets. I don't know that you could read it, but for instance, it's biogas, ethanol, fermentation, machinery, oil, so on and so forth. So each column is a bucket, and the patents have been reviewed and analyzed and categorized by patent strength by an attorney who not only understands the details of protecting patents at the patent office, but also has experience in enforcing patents in the courts and resisting attacks of the patents at the patent office and the courts, and experience in terms of licensing these kinds of patents. And so what you see here is the green color pertains to the lower value patents, just rated on 1 to 5. The red is for patents that have a strength of 4, and the yellow is for patents that have the highest strength of 5. So the CEO, CTO, marketing can look at this chart and say, you know, we have a lot of patents in the area of production. That's good because that's important to us. And we also have a good percentage of those that are higher value patents. We don't have so much in fermentation. That's okay because that's an area that we're getting out of, and so on and so forth. So there are many different kinds of tools like this, of displays like this, of analytics like this, that once the patents have been reviewed and put into a database, the raw data there can be viewed and combined in ways that are very valuable in communicating what could be done with them. And once you know what can be done with them, then things start to happen. These sorts of processes, these sorts of databases, these sorts of insights empower the internal IP department. So rather than being someone who is focusing on the details of getting things done, the internal IP manager can start to be part of the top corporate strategy team by being able to talk about this particular asset, how it could be used, and to strategically develop the portfolio and use the portfolio in alignment with those objectives. So what's happening here? We're leveraging knowledge into IP strategy. And so knowledge of the portfolio, knowledge of the property rights, knowledge of the business value of those property rights forms the foundation for your IP strategy. And what we have found, and we've worked with companies in various industries, is that a nominal investment in developing this kind of knowledge database can leverage significant future dividends in many, many IP functions. So, for instance, if you were to look at the portfolio from the standpoint of a due diligence exercise because you're considering whether to acquire the portfolio and see whether it fits in with your own assets, you would be able to use the information on your portfolio and then develop a similar database for the incoming portfolio. And after that exercise, you can still use the information about your portfolio for these other kinds of purposes. And that's what we found, because oftentimes we got called in to do the analysis for the transaction, and then we're able to leverage double dip, which was very nice from a cost standpoint. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the best practices that we've seen in developing and using the business value of a patent portfolio. And the panelists are going to talk about this in a bit as well. And what kinds of basic analysis is done, what kinds of computerized analysis is done, what kinds of output is there. And then when you actually do your legal analysis, how does that compare with the results that you've seen from the computer analysis? Obviously, now you're dealing with facts as opposed to assumptions. And then what do you do to develop that portfolio? And by developing the portfolio, what we're talking about is increasing the business value of the portfolio by increasing the value of the patents, by getting claims to inventions that clearly articulate what it is that you can do with it so that you could explain it to a jury, to a court, to somebody who may be buying or taking a license, that your legal rights are cleaner and have less flaws, you're subject to less attacks, and so on and so forth. And then finally, at the end of the row, what can you do with those nicely refined and focused assets from the standpoint of monetization or from the standpoint of other business use in the company? So as the speakers have said throughout the conference, creating an IP culture is very important, and it is a top-down sort of thing. I mean, our experience is that if the founder of the company is an IP person and has come from that culture and brings that to the business, all kinds of wonderful things flow, and the people who are managing the IP have a really wonderful and exciting and vital job. So if the management understands the IP and values the IP and manages the IP, it's a very good situation. And it starts again with understanding the IP. And so if what you give your management is a typical patent attorney report, they're not going to understand the IP. They're not even going to understand that it's possible to understand it. And then building IP awareness in the company. You know, what do different businesses do to do this? How do they communicate about the value of the IP? If you're in an organization that is in, say, the petroleum industry, you know, and people use trade secrets to protect know-how and don't really use patents so much, that's a completely different kind of culture. If you're in a situation where you're doing pharma or medical devices and you want exclusivity, it's a very different sort of thing. But the general principles are the same. You know, understanding what is patentable, when to file, what's prior art. And in the United States, we've had a lot of changes over the last several years, and in particular this year, as to what kinds of inventions can be eligible to be patented. How unobvious do they need to be? And so having an awareness of that in the major jurisdictions in which you're trying to protect your inventive rights is important. You may decide, if you're in the software area, that you're not going to take an aggressive stance for the next year until you see what the appeals courts are doing with the decisions that came down. If things are stable and looking your way, you may be more aggressive. So having that kind of awareness is important. The internal procedures, how does information flow to the IP manager, who provides that kind of information, what kind of feedback is there, and then the community that you're building. Is the community one in which the inventors feel valued? And value doesn't necessarily mean just paying more money. Value means giving the kind of human recognition that all of us, you know, appreciate in our day-to-day jobs. And some of the subcategories of this would be to evaluate the key inventions and the needs of the portfolio, and to meet with people. And meeting with people and talking with people is very important. And then sample claims, and talk about patentability, and evaluate the needs, And then I think one thing that is very important in the United States is to strategically evaluate what it is that you're putting in the patent office from the standpoint of using the patents. So it's a very different thing to be able to say I'm one of the top patent filers in the United States. It's another thing to say I have patents that I can use for licensing. These will hold up in litigation. And so figuring out what you're going to do with these patents, who you're going to assert them against, who you may be selling them to or licensing them to, where the challenges are going to come, are going to dictate what you're going to do in prosecuting the claims. And patent prosecution is a business that a lot of us patent lawyers are in as part of our business. And in many respects, and for many clients, it's become somewhat of a commodity business where the clients are looking for the lowest price and are trying to shave the cost down, down, down. And anyone who's gone into a litigation with a patent that has a claim, that has a problem, that could have been fixed during prosecution had somebody cared about it, would readily see that a couple of $100 of an investment to know what you have and clean it up at that point in time is now resulting in tens of thousands of dollars or maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars to try to fix it under pressure, under the scrutiny of the other side, and possibly not being able to come anywhere near it. Obviously, you don't want to be perfect on anything, on everything, but you do want to approach that perfection on things that are very important, particularly when it's easy to do with an incremental, slow incremental cost.